Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Christian Capitalist Podcast. I'm Rich Sanders, your host, and so glad to be joined today by Zoran. And we're going to talk all about his name, his work as a DJ in wedding and corporate events here on the Emerald Coast, and how we glorify God through our work.
Amen, amen, amen.
But first, as you know, the Christian Capitalist Podcast is part of a movement. You can find out more about our movement at christiancapitalist.life. And of course, if you like this episode and feel like people can benefit from its message, like, follow, share, and do all the things on social media and our YouTube channel for this purpose. But without any further ado, good morning, Zoran.
Good morning, Rich.
It's good to see you, and God bless you.
Thank you. You too, sir. Appreciate it.
We are. I'm dressed in pink because we have just celebrated Easter. Zoran has got his black hat with his white cross on because it is starting to be a busy time here in the Emerald Coast. Yes. If you're in the wedding business.
Bless beyond belief.
So tell us a little bit about what you do and how you're involved with bringing so many people together here in the Emerald Coast.
So, Rich, first of all, thank you for this opportunity for me to share my life story, my testimony. This is what a true Christian capitalist is all about, is elevating other people to the levels that you've been blessed with. So thank you once again.
Oh, you're welcome. And I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Absolutely, Rich. Yeah. So blessed beyond belief to be living, in this beautiful area now for 3 decades or more. I found this place in the early 80s when I was young, and I never looked back really, because coming from Chicago, as you know, it's a windy city.
Yes,
it's super cold, and so finding this place in my 20s was absolutely a great blessing because I love the ocean. It's such a peaceful and tranquil place for me to de-stress, relax, and be connected to the Father, And so I never lost sight of that. Even though I did move to Atlanta for a couple of years for a better job, better opportunity, this is exactly what I missed. No money cannot replace the peace and tranquility we have here on the Gulf Coast. So,
Amen.
Blessed beyond belief.
So were you born and raised in Chicago?
Actually, no. I was born in Europe, in the former Yugoslavia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so raised by grandparents who were religious, and excuse me, my first experience was with them, of course, being raised in religious family as a Seventh-day Adventist.
Wow, interesting.
So and
Seventh-day Adventist from Yugoslavia. You don't hear that story very often, Zoran,
exactly.
At least here.
And so true that. And so the experience that I've had, growing up with this religion, as a child, was that it was very much traditional beliefs, So we believed in Sabbath from Friday at sundown till Saturday at sundown. And then also, we did not consume any pork or anything with hoofs.
Okay.
And of course, on Sabbath day, there was no work, no cleaning, no cooking, no going to school or work or anything like that. And in Europe, at this time, we went to school 6 days a week. So everybody knew I was a Christian. And in that society, it was actually not encouraged. It was like, why?
Right, right. Interesting.
Yes, it was very...
So Yugoslavia now is, I think, 3 different nations.
Yes.
But at the time you were one, and at the time it sounds like when you were a kid, very much behind the Iron Curtain.
Yes.
Do you remember those days?
Vaguely.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll bet you were little.
Oh, yeah. And, one thing I remembered, is that even though all the republics are now separated, they were together, and you made a unity, because Yugo means south and Slavics, right? So the Southern Slavs were all united, after World War II ended, they all came together and formed this union. And so it was all about brotherhood and sisterhood at this point. And so, there was no animosity if you're Bosnian, Croatian, Serbian, Macedonian, Slovenian, or any other, ethnic group, or, any group that belonged to that union. It was really interesting upbringing, and growing up in that society, was very much an experience that it's hard to explain, because I really feel that you have to live somewhere else to appreciate where you live today. And so living in America and being an American citizen, resident, is absolutely an honor and a something that a lot of people aspire that, they want to live in this country. And then how to do it, how to do it legally, of course, is the question,
Yeah, exactly.
And so,
well, when did you move from Yugoslavia to Chicago?
yeah, so my dad was here. He was already here. And so I finally got to live with him when I was 13 years old.
Gotcha.
So my grandparents and we all came together. They brought me to the States, so that I could actually now rejoin my life with my father, who was remarried at the time. And so, but he wasn't very religious. He was a CEO, Christmas and Easter only, right? And he was more of an orthodox, religious beliefs, So having said that, I miss the traditional, church. I miss that, growing up in the, in the Seventh-day Adventist. And also, by the way, it's the only church that still washes each other's feet.
Interesting. We were just talking about that last week because Easter was Sunday. So Maundy Thursday was the Last Supper and the foot washing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's that is a different way to commemorate the day.
But that's how I was brought up with.
Rich, isn't that something?
I remember that to this day. How honored I was, to be, in this, religious, belief in this system.
Well, going back to, I want to ask you real quick before we start talking about Chicago and how you worship there.
Yeah.
For those first 12 years, 13 years in Yugoslavia, what are your memories of the way the economy worked and business? Because as you know, the title of the book and the movement is The Christian Capitalist. We advocate for free enterprise.
Absolutely.
and we advocate for capitalism because it is the way, to make profit, but also from that profit to benefit your neighbor. And in a socialist system, which of course we do not embrace, that is a very different way to live. Do you remember that? Or was Yugoslavia more kind of on the free enterprise because it's so far from Mother Russia and the head of the Soviet Union at the time? Or was it more kind of a free enterprise system like it was before World War II?
Actually, you know what? The only thing I remember, is that there was a lot of government-funded, things like, your healthcare, your education. All of these things were, government-funded. And it was mostly government operated. So most businesses were, factories and things like that. And then very few independent business owners. And in order to succeed, in order to have your dream become a reality, you would have to move to another country that offered more of the, a different structure, to be your own business, to have your own business, and to be a capitalist, for lack of a better, it's you have to move. And that's exactly what my father did. My father, he lived in Paris, France for 8 years. And then from Paris, he came to the United States because his brother was here. And so this is once again, you have to have some kind of family that lives in the States so you can be a member of this society. And, and so when my dad came to Chicago, I think Chicago was the hub. Most people came to either Chicago or New York. Right.
And was there a Slavic or Yugoslavic community in Chicago that your brother and your dad moved to?
Absolutely.
That always helps.
Absolutely. Yes. And so, and to this day, there's, cathedrals and churches and communities and, blocks of nothing but, former Yugoslavians, that live.
That's so cool.
Now. And so restaurants and, just the culture is still there, and they have festivals and, there's a church in Libertyville, Illinois.
Okay.
And, it's an Orthodox church, and it's like, basically a place, where you can come and really feel the tradition of being back in the, Yugoslavian country.
Yeah.
But as a kid, all I remember was, that, I am a child of the Most High God, and that I am created for a purpose. And then knowing that my destination was going to be America at one time, because, living there, it was temporary. Once again, being raised by my grandparents and uncles and aunts. I had 9 of them. So that was my extended family with lots of love. I knew that I was going to be living with my dad eventually, and then that I was, obviously going to be coming to America, and just like the movie, Coming to America.
Exactly. I love that.
Was a something that I really looked forward to. And it was like a transcending experience to finally land in Chicago.
So now you're in Chicago. My big question is
Yes,
with your father, your uncle, your grandparents,
yes,
this Yugoslavian community,
yes,
and the Most High God with you.
yes.
Did you speak English, or did you have to go through this cultural change and learn to speak English at the same time?
Rich, my 8th grade year in the States, all I did was take English courses.
All right, good.
Yeah. And so I don't even know how I passed 8th grade, because it was, once again, now keep in mind, math, on the other hand, I was an expert because we were just, going through metric system.
So you're taking English and you're living in America and going to high school.
Yes.
Now, Zoran, just to help put the timeline together, if I remember, Yugoslavia hosted the 1984 Olympics, maybe? I can't remember. Yugoslavia hosted the Olympics. And that really was a great chance to put Yugoslavia on the map.
Yes.
But soon thereafter, war erupted between all the different, kind of ethnic divisions in Yugoslavia. How did that impact you?
Sad situation. Well, living, there as a child and remembering how it was all about brotherhood and sisterhood.
Yeah.
And that regardless of your religious beliefs, because once again, keep in mind, Muslims, Christians, we all resided together. We're neighbors, right? And so when that took place, it really kind of hurt, to see the destruction taking place.
Yeah.
And that neighbor against neighbor. And, and so we're all multicultural. I have family, my grandparents are not all Serbian, they're from Montenegro, they're from different parts of, that country, and so to see that destruction was really disappointing, almost to the point where I was like, that's not my country anymore, because that's not what I remember.
Yeah.
And now,
because Sarajevo was completely war torn, right?
Yes,
it's like right up there with Beirut, as
Absolutely,
used to be awesome, and now it's just demolished.
It was sad to see, the destruction, and the degree, it was greed and religious. Once again, it was, not agreeing with each other's, religious beliefs, and it was like, we all believe in the same God to a certain extent, and aren't we, shouldn't we be better, And so it was really disappointing to see that. But like I said, at this point I was already, Americanized, and I was living a whole new life. And so I still had some family there though, and I know they were going through some difficulties. And I have a half brother that lives in Vienna, Austria.
Oh, wow.
And I have a half sister that lives in Belgium, and so, obviously, and then I had, still uncles and aunts living in the former Yugoslavia, and so they were going through a lot of different things through there.
So now you're through high school and you're in your 20s and you're still living in Chicago. What brought you down here? Were you like so many people? You're on vacation?
Yeah. So my current relationship at that time, her mom and dad were retired military.
Okay.
And so they decided to, live here, because they were stationed, here. And so me and my current relationship at the time, we decided to come and visit her mom and dad. And then, of course, that was to me, like, once again, the discovery of a lifetime.
Yeah.
Destin in Fort Walton Beach, once again, the Highway 98 was only a 2-line country highway,
Oh, wow.
So, and so this is the early 80s, and so once again, I just love the area. It was incredible.
So you get down here.
Yes.
What'd you do? How did you make a living 40 years ago with the 2-lane Highway 98, which, by the way, for those of y'all who aren't from here, is now 6 lanes of very busy traffic 24/7.
Absolutely. So, since I did not complete my college, education, I had to resort to, basically blue collar jobs, so it was whatever was available, like the Breakers condominiums on Okaloosa Island.
I remember those. Okay. My parents had a condo in those a long time ago.
I was a laborer.
Wow.
And working, those kind of jobs, roofer, a tree trimmer assistant, carrying the sappy,
oh, that's dirty work.
Dirty work.
And dangerous.
Yes. And it was basically 6 a.m. until 6 p.m.
Wow.
And so, and then a friend of mine was working at the radio station at 1400 WNUE. AM stereo, Rich. And So
That's great.
she was like, we have a part-time spot at the radio station. Would you be interested? And I'm like, I think I would like to check that out, because I was always, I love the music industry, of course, and working in the studio was kind of appealing, And so,
Yeah.
sure enough, that was my first start.
Oh, I love that.
In the radio broadcasting
In your early 20s.
in my early 20s, yes. And so, it was a midnight to 6 shift.
I was going to say, I'm betting they didn't start you off with the morning drive or whatever it's called then.
Exactly. But it was a great way for me to learn the business,
Right.
of
Right.
obviously being a sound technician, doing commercials, speaking, live on the microphone. And that's what created the experience that today I still value that because it propelled me to where I am today.
All right. So as you're playing this rock and roll
Yes.
stuff, let me ask you, because
Yeah.
it's so rare to get to talk music with somebody my
Thank
age.
you. Thank
And if
you.
you're young or old and you're listening to this podcast and you're not listening to music from the 70s or 80s, either fast forward or maybe learn something because this is good stuff. So I have kind of two sets of favorite bands from those eras.
Okay.
The first set is kind of 70s, early 80s stadium rock.
Yes.
Boston, REO
Yes.
Speedwagon,
Yes.
Styx,
Yes.
Foreigner, and Journey.
Exactly.
And it sounds like you're playing all of that music all the
Absolutely.
time, right?
Absolutely.
So what do you remember from those days and those bands? And
Yeah.
did they ever come down here? Did you ever get a chance to talk to them as a DJ?
My first concert was Yes.
That's
The group
awesome.
Yes. And their roundabout tour.
Yeah.
And their stage was actually revolving.
Ooh, that's cool.
I know. I was like, wow, this is so way cool. Right?
That's
And
great.
so, big fan of, stadium rock, and all the classics, because even to this day, this is how I can tell a lot about person's life and what they've been through by their playlist.
Right on.
Because now, obviously, I curate their music. And we have software on our website, where they submit their music so that I can,
that's cool.
be on target, exactly knowing what they desire for their special event.
Yeah.
And so when I see that young couples are listening to Journey and,
Right on.
Doobie Brothers, and music from, back in the day, I'm like, their mom and dad did a really great job, because obviously in the car, before the iPad, you have to listen to your mom and dad's music, and so.
That's so funny you say that.
Yeah.
That's how I know to this day virtually every word of every song from the Beatles and the Beach Boys
Yes.
and all those guys, because my mother would listen to that on the radio while she's
Yes.
driving us around.
Yes.
All right, so top of my playlist from those days and those bands is Roll with the Changes by REO
Yes.
Speedwagon
Love that.
and Come Sail Away by Styx.
Absolutely.
Because I find those songs inspirational.
Absolutely.
How about you? Do you have a favorite song from that era?
Well, Doobie Brothers, definitely, and just the ones you mentioned as well, REO Speedwagon. I mean, that was like the band of the day, in those
Exactly.
in that decade. But Doobie Brothers, Jesus is just all right with me. And so Beatles, of course, they went through a lot of different, phases themselves, looking and searching, for, what is life about, and things like that. Their Magical Mystery Tour,
Right.
and things like that,
Right.
is what, and then of course Zeppelin was, also, and I got into, Moody Blues and Deep Purple, and some more like,
Good rock.
Deeper cuts, things like that. Steely Dan,
that's good.
Boss Skaggs, so, of course, I do love classical music as well. I love jazz. I love blues, being from Chicago, that was also, I was exposed to a lot of that as well.
That's great.
Once again, I'm a big art fan and music fan, to this day. So my uncle Vladimir, his son Philip Subotic now is also an artist who does frescoes. So he does, this is an art that almost is obsolete.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Almost unheard of,
Yeah,
unless you're going to an ancient museum or an ancient church. That's so cool.
And that's what he does. He goes to churches and fixes up and touches up the old frescoes. And then he also produces new ones, to the churches that would like that.
That's so cool. And he's still in Europe?
He's in Europe, he's in the States, he travels all around, and so
Wow.
I actually post some of his work on my Hope and Restoration Facebook page, and because
That's
that is,
cool.
yeah, I want people to see this incredible work, that still exists today and has a lot of meanings.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so to progress a little further, and so I was an art gallery manager when I arrived into the Destin Fort Walton Beach area. Some of the Destin Art Gallery was in existence back then, and Maison LaSalle was also at the Fort Walton Beach. So I was there with doing custom framing, matting, preservation
Oh,
of
wow.
art. So I got involved with that. And so that was also part of my experience and part of my work that I elevated to do. And then, of course, music was and accompanied that as well.
Right.
Because, to make a living, in a society, you have to have more than one hat, and so.
Well said.
Yes, it's impossible, especially we also live in a tourist area. So being involved in multiple different avenues is essential. But music took over. Art was great, for a while. It was a great chapter in my life. But then the music, obviously the radio took over, and I started to get more involved. I got a full-time gig with Wave 102.1.
Oh, yeah.
The classic rock station.
Yeah.
When it was mom and pop at the time,
Mm-hmm.
we had our studio on Main Street here in Destin.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so I got to work with some great minds, some great, creative minds and things like that. And then the radio started to change, and started to, conglomerate and cluster with other stations and
Right.
become more corporate.
Right.
And at that point, I realized that, I needed to have a way out. I had to have, because once again, I saw what was taking place, because corporations would buy the stations and then cluster them together. And what would happen with the staff? We were easily disposed of.
Right. Exactly. Because you're bringing in shows from other places.
Yes.
Right.
And the computer generated shows were, because you could voice one radio, many radio stations with just one staff, with
Mm-hmm.
one group of, and so.
And I think that happens now on the Wave. I mean, we love 102.1
Yes.
The Wave, but it sounds very
Yeah.
like it's always the same guy.
Yeah.
And so I assume that guy may not be here. He's from somewhere else doing a lot of radio stations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When we were, part of the community where you could actually call us, for information, what's taking place and things like that, the request line was open. We would answer it,
It's so funny, Zoran, as we're talking about this, I can't help but think of one of my favorite shows from the 70s, WKRP,
Yes,
Cincinnati.
yes.
So was it like
Johnny,
that?
yeah. Well,
Johnny Fever. You were like Johnny
exactly.
Fever.
Most definitely. It was absolutely, that was the radio that I remember.
Yeah.
And so, and then, I was like, it's changing, and I need to think of a way out so that I can be more independent and utilize this knowledge that I've gained.
Yeah.
Speaking in public, doing live broadcasts, creating content for the commercials, and writing scripts and things like that was, great experience for me. And so
That's really cool.
then I opened up. I partnered with one of my military friends, and we started doing mobile events. And so I was actually fortunate enough to get hired by a company from St. Petersburg, Sunset Entertainment. They were looking for.
I have to ask, since you're from Yugoslavia, St. Petersburg, Russia, or St. Petersburg, Florida?
Florida. Yes. So
You're with this company from St. Petersburg. It also sounded like you had a lot of autonomy and were really running your own business.
Yeah. So that actually was my first experience in special events and weddings, because it was about learning, wedding etiquette and exactly what's involved in a wedding, and how to be an MC, a master of ceremonies, and guide, the bride and groom through the process, and ceremony music, amplification, sound technician, and then reception, introductions, and all the things that take place, traditional things in a wedding. It's a production.
It is very much a production. Let me ask you this while you're taking a sip of water.
Sure.
One of the blessings of my life is, of course, being a pastor.
Yes.
And because our church is online and we have a community of people who are elderly, my age, younger, we're kind of all over the place. So I don't get to do as many weddings as I would as if I was in a brick and mortar church in one location. Having said that, I love doing weddings.
That's awesome.
When did you notice the trend away from what I would call church music, where people aren't picking hymns to sing during the service, but picking more pop music? They then kind of goes into the reception. Like the weddings that I have done, and they've been great, but the weddings that I've done outside the church are typically not church music, even during the ceremony. Have you noticed that trend as well?
Yeah, to some extent, Rich. But, the traditionalists, they still like to have that touch of, spiritual music for the ceremony. So canon in D, classical pieces like that.
You have folks ask you to help marry them from all over the nation.
Yes.
How does that work? Tell us a little bit about your business,
Yes.
because needless to say, if you are interested in getting married here on the Emerald Coast, you need to use this guy and get the experience and enjoy the process, enjoy the celebration. And as you said, I mean, it is a production. So tell us about your production and your methodology, and speak to those people from Chicago who are interested in getting married down here.
Come and see us. Come to paradise.
Exactly.
So Rich, it's all about, the vision of the client. Everybody's different. Everybody has a vision. It's a once in a lifetime, that these, occasions take place, and so we take great care. I have a team also now that, it's not just me.
Do most people say, hey, Zoran, we're getting married at this location. Would you come do it? Or do they say, hey, Zoran, we want you to help with our wedding production. Where would you recommend? Which comes first?
Kind of both, Rich. Yeah. I mean, I have some clients that actually will check my availability before they even book the date.
That's cool. So, what an honor.
I know, exactly, right? But not very often, right? But, so most of the time they might already have a venue and they may already have all the vendors. Now they come into me at the last minute for entertainment because now they're realizing, we need music.
Right.
We got the caterer, we got the photographer, we have the coordinator, but now we're missing one very valuable piece. And you can have music, you can have, just like in a house, you can have all the furniture, but unless you have something on the wall, it's kind of empty, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So music is definitely an essential part of it. Now, of course, some people have tried just the playlist and just running the playlist. And of course, that's so informal because the playlist cannot capture the moment.
Right. You've got to have someone narrate. Yeah. When you have somebody with like a speaker and a playlist, that's great. But it helps to have someone tie it together.
Yes, and blend it together because when they submit their playlist to us, we get all the music and we place it at the right time, at the right location. And so I like to explain music as serving fine dinner, like a fine dining experience.
I like that.
So you will have hors d'oeuvres, you will have soup, you will have salad, you will have main course, you will have dessert, you will have maybe a glass of wine. And all of these things, is for a great experience because obviously, you're having cocktails, you're having dinner, you're having dancing. All of these different, parts of your event require a different type of music.
Absolutely. I never even thought about that. Absolutely. For the ambiance.
It's a celebration, And then not to even mention the ceremony part of it as well. That's also a very important part as well, because that is, once again, that is the formality of, joining two lives together, right?
Exactly. One of the theology, the most important theological parts of the Christian capitalist is that when we work, we glorify God.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to have crosses at every wedding. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to sing church hymns at every wedding. I think that you can project to people the light of Christ simply leading by example.
Absolutely.
It sounds like you do that. Do you agree with me?
Absolutely, Rich. Absolutely. The light of God, that's always my wish, is that they will see the light of the Father, through me, through my words, through my actions, through my demeanor, to the works of these hands.
I love that.
And so, that is definitely my goal in life, is to project His goodness and light onto the world and everyone I come in contact with.
And do it through your business. Are you all around Florida?
All around. So this year we performed at the Harley Davidson location
yeah.
for children in crisis.
Oh, I remember that
Yeah,
event back in
was,
November, right?
No, it was actually January.
In January,
Yeah.
okay.
And so it was the father-daughter dance. And so it was a fundraiser.
That's cool.
JP Carducci was also part of it as well. He was the organizer. I contacted JP. I'm like, JP, if you need music, I'm available. Hope and Restoration too, will come in and play the music.
That's so great.
And so he's like, he goes, I think I already have somebody, but let me double check. Call me back, man, we could really use you. I'm like, I'm there, not to worry, right? So we did that. And then the next show we did was The Night to Shine, the Team Tebow Foundation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Zoran, the title of the book and the podcast and the movement is The Christian Capitalist. And as you know, our signature question is, what does it mean to you to be a Christian capitalist?
Rich, thank you for that question as well, because, those two words almost don't go together.
Yeah, a lot of people think they don't. Right? That's right.
And so everything we have is God's. And so being blessed with everything that we possess, with our health, with our talents, with the goodness of God, our families, our pets, possessions, this is all His. And so we all know that the treasure is in heaven, and that's where our focus should be. And so giving back and helping someone and giving them a hand and helping them up from wherever they are in life. Just exactly what you're doing, Rich. This is exactly what this is all about, is, leveling someone up to the next level and letting the world know, what's taking place and what's going on in people's lives, where they can be a benefit to the greater good.
Yes.
I think that's what it's all about.
Man, I love that. Yeah. Amen. Amen. Beautifully said. And thank you so much for your time today. It's been great getting to visit with you. Love you too. And get a chance to visit with you and learn more about your business and your charity and your charitable work.
Thank you, sir.
And if you have enjoyed this conversation, please like, follow, and share this episode as with all the other episodes of the Christian Capitalist Podcast. Don't forget, you can find out more about our movement on christiancapitalist.life and all the social media channels. I'm Rich Sanders for the Christian Capitalist Podcast, where the more we make, the more we give.